Welcome to 11th edition, where we take an existing Magic card and design 10 more versions of it. I'm Tim.
And I'm Markus.
Today's card is Fact or Fiction.
Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put one pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Second edition, Sadis Bargain. An opponent separates your graveyard into 2 piles. Put one of those piles into your hand. Exile Sadis Bargain.
Try to stack your graveyard as high as you can, and then you're just going to draw 7 cards.
It can play interestingly with things like fetch lands or self-mill.
Like a Stitcher Supplier.
Each card that you put into your graveyard is about half a card for doing the bargain. If you Stitcher Supplier and sacrifice Stitcher Supplier, then you're going to get a lot, but it's a fair amount of work.
Yeah, you're going into that like 3-4 card combo at that point. This also kind of compares with Boneyard Parley. In your card, you don't get free cast, so it's a lot slower in exchange for being cheaper. Third edition is Factoid or Fib. This is 1 and a blue instant. Reveal the top 3 cards of your library. An opponent separates those into 2 piles, put one into your hand and the other on the bottom of your library in any order.
It's an on-average half-sized fact or fiction for half the cost.
This is Jace Architect of Thoughts -2, and it's never been made into a spell.
It can be a 2-mana divinate as long as you're fine with divinating for the 2 worst cards according to your opponent.
I was thinking of Chart a Course here, where you sometimes have to give up a card. Your opponent is sort of deciding what card you have to put on the line to give up.
Did you intentionally choose bottom of the library in order to avoid graveyard value?
Not intentionally.
If it did go to the graveyard, you could do something like Factoid or Fib and reveal Arclight Phoenix and Opt and something else.
Oh, yeah.
And then your opponent would melt into the floor with Sheer Terror. At 3 mana, becomes like a variation on Compulsive Research, Thirst for Knowledge, or Thirst for Meaning. You get either 2 cards and put 1 other card into the bin, or you get 1 card and put 2 into the bin.
Yeah, it might be that the 3 mana is still fair and playable for this card.
So the new card is Pain or Patience. Exile the top 5 cards of your library. An opponent separates them into 2 piles. Give cards in 1 pile. You may cast this card until the end of your next turn, and deal damage to that opponent equal to the total converted mana cost of the other pile.
Your opponent doesn't want to stack 2 expensive but bad cards into 1 pile.
If I put their bomb in this pile, but it costs 4 mana, I'm going to get Noggin for 4 if they take the other pile.
Pretty hard if you're playing this card for one of the 2 piles to have it CMC less than 5 or 6.
I like the idea of your opponent being like, oh, don't take this pile, I'll get hit in the face so hard, or oh, don't take this pile, that card is just way too good.
So you can't use lands with this.
You can't currently.
The fact or fictioniness of it goes away when lands aren't part of the game.
I think that's one of the things that I would revise as far as stuff goes. Using the lands as tiebreakers is peak fact or fiction.
5th edition is Factor Selector. When Factor Selector enters the battlefield, an opponent divides ability counters for lifelink, flying, death touch, haste, and trample into 2 piles. You put 1 pile on the Factor Selector.
I love this. I don't know what I would do as an opponent at all.
The numbers here might be a little in that Questing Beast territory.
You see these 5 counters. You think about the imaginary prospects of the card when you're splitting the piles. You look at the board state and you just sweat bullets at this scary golem. Haste is immediately the tiebreaker counter unless your opponent's aggressive, I think. Flying, haste, trample, and lifelink death touch would be my 2 piles sight unseen.
We got like a baby worm coil on one side and volcanic dragon or something.
I also like that he looks a little arc-boundy because I can imagine this guy carrying a bunch of counters.
Yeah, we need modular, but for all counters.
I would love that. 6th edition, Lie Chewer. It has Devour 2. It's a 3/3. When Lie Chewer enters the battlefield, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is its power. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put 1 of those piles into your hand and the other into your graveyard.
So we got a little conflux action here?
That's correct.
All right, so I get my Factoid or Fib if I don't devour anything. If I devour 1 poor little creature, I get a Factor Fiction, and then it just goes up from there. And then each creature I devour, I'm sort of getting a card, an FOF card.
I was surprised that Devour ended up working so well for this when I was designing.
Yeah, you kind of need the trigger to go with Devour to make it sing. I think this trigger works. If you want to do less Devour work, you could play something like Sphinx of Uthuun, but you're paying a little more mana for that. Are you able to have this strategy that pivots from spraying out a lot of little creatures into eat them all, draw a huge fresh grip of cards?
Maybe you factor fiction far enough to see some Thopter Foundry Sword of the Meek style action.
I kind of wish Devour could eat artifacts now.
This thing, I think, made a pretty good case for Devour in my mind.
So for 7th edition, I thought it might be appropriate if we played a little factor fiction here. I'm going to give you 5 cards. You're going to separate them into 2 piles.
Reach into Rumors seems really wild to me.
Does that mean it's going to be piled in a small pack?
I don't know. I'm still deciding on my piles. I don't want him to have Pact or Fiction, because then I'll have to ante one of my designs. My splits are going to be Reach into Rumors, an Approval Process in 1 pile, Litany of Demands, Pact or Fiction, and Fauna or Flora in another pile.
I think I'm taking the first pile. 7th edition, Approval Process. Opponents play with the top card of their libraries revealed. If an opponent would draw a card, you may choose to put that card on the bottom of that player's library. If you do, that player draws 2 cards instead.
You don't get to know what the 2 other cards are.
There's like Fortune's Favor, where they split it into a face-up and a face-down pile.
I think this is really good against combo decks, because if you just know there's a card that will kill you if they draw it, you can see that on top and just say nope.
But even if you sideboard it in there, it's not guaranteed to help you with those 8 cards.
If you say nope to that one, they now have a 7 in however many cards are left in their deck chance of drawing the card that screws you up.
So maybe it's only good for like a critical window where you won't have enough removal and counter spells to keep everything under control, but you just need to improve your odds for a couple turns that they don't have the killer thing that they really want.
There's a modern deck that mills with Lantern of Insight and Codex Shredder in order to keep their opponent off of stuff that could win the game. That deck's a little infamous for being pretty long to play against. All right, our 8th edition, Forced Retreat. Single white for an instant. Attacking player separates their attacking creatures into 2 piles. Remove all creatures in one of those piles from combat.
You saw Fog. It's to my advantage that it only stops some of them.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm waiting for their Alpha Strike. I'll blunt whichever half of it is worse for me. And then I'll like trade 2 creatures, eat a creature, and come out way ahead.
There's also a hidden mode on this card.
You attack improperly and now you're...
Yeah, you attack with your guys. One of your guys gets screwed over by a combat trick and you're like, whoop, never mind.
That's what you wanted in your Factor Fiction cards, right?
Yeah.
Infinite hidden modes. If you're the attacking player, you make the piles and you pick who retreats.
Yeah.
Wow. 9th edition, Reach into Rumors. Reveal your sideboard. An opponent splits those cards into 2 piles. Shuffle 1 pile into your library.
I'm just trying to imagine the sort of wish board that this grabs.
Maybe you just put all your high drops in your sideboard and you have all low drops in your main deck. And then you just shuffle in 8 expensive cards in the middle of the game.
Or if you're playing anything that can tutor stuff up,
a half of a Mastermind's Inquisition, and then it gets your sideboard into your library so they can then be accessed by actual tutors.
How many of the cards will be real cards in any of the splits? Because usually your sideboard cards are like 10s or 0s against a deck.
Yeah, the Grafdigger's Cage against my opponent's red aggro deck.
And how do they split the Grafdigger's Cages if you have multiple?
All right, so you got to adjust your main deck plan such that you can sacrifice all the chaff in your sideboard that you don't want.
Reach into Rumors, put a 0 cost into your deck, and then cascade into it.
Oh, gonna living end some people. And this is also like a great training opportunity for new generations of players to make sure to de-sideboard because it'll be more obvious. Your sideboard will just be like 7 cards sitting off to the, oh yeah, I gotta de-sideboard before the next round.
Yeah.
We're helping people here on 11th edition.
10th edition is Factor Fiction. 1 in a blue for an instant. Draw a card, name a non-land card, then choose a card in your hand. An opponent guesses whether the chosen card is the named card. You may reveal that card and draw a card if they guessed wrong.
I'm forecasting. I'm saying, hey, I have this. I'm not showing it to you, but I have this.
And then they say, yeah, or nuh-uh. And then if they guessed wrong, you draw a card.
So I'm getting, another draw 1.5 cards card.
Let's say that your opponent is really afraid of Doomblade. You cast this, you draw a card, and that card is Doomblade, and you name Doomblade. They say, yeah, you've got that. And then you don't reveal Doomblade and choose not to draw another card. So they think you don't have Doomblade.
Your fact or fiction might be a better use of the term fact or fiction. Am I telling you a truth or not, a lie or not? Than the original, which is like, here's a whole bunch of truth.
Burn all the other copies of fact or fiction. Mine's the real one now.
So our 11th edition this time around, we're going to head back to Fiora for Lore Sorter. Reveal Lore Sorter as you draft it. After you draft Lore Sorter, open a sealed booster pack. The player to your left separates those cards into 3 piles. Draft 1 pile. Then add the remaining cards to the draft as 1 pack and pass it.
Ooh. I would change it to the player you are passing to.
Ooh, good tweak.
If they've read signals well enough prior to then, they can split the draft packs so that they know that you will pass them the stuff that they want and that you will get whatever the bare minimum to make it worth your while to do that.
I guess unless you got some hardcore collusion.
That's a possibility in conspiracy.
Actually, if we're going to make a deal, you and me are sitting next to each other. I draft this card and I say, hey, you ready to really just like put the screws on everyone else? And you say, hell yeah, I am.
And then go into the multiplayer as public enemy number 1.
Oh.
Thanks for joining us for another 11th edition.
If you've got your own version of Fact or Fiction or want to request the next 11th edition, comment below.
You can also reach us at Magic Design Cast and on the Beacon of Creation Discord.
Thanks for watching.